I'm here with Dr. John Demartini today. He's a behavioural specialist who's dedicated over 43 years of his life helping businesses, consulting, and working with people to improve their situation regardless of the external environment. How are you today?
Doing great, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for allocating this time. In your view, what are your thoughts about people working with what they have regardless of the external environment? For example, the economy, the business situation at the moment, or even external forces?
Well, it was William James who said that the greatest discovery of his generation is that human beings can alter life by altering their perceptions, decisions, and attitudes of mind. So it's not really what happens to us on the outside that is determining it. It's how we perceive it and decide what we do with it. So if a person is really caring about humanity and finding out what the true needs currently are, even in a changing environment, and keeping current with the true needs, and making sure that they're offering services that match those needs, they can take a challenging environment, under quotations, and turn it into great opportunities. When there was a tsunami, for instance, in Phuket in 2004, the bicycle industry flourished, and the demolition area flourished. So there was always businesses that boomed during those times that you don't hear about. You only hear about the devastation. So the wise individual will care enough about humanity to have enough adaptation and resiliency to go and fill the new needs. So there's never really a downtime. There's just a different time.
So it's about adapting?
Well, if the person is doing something that's meaningful, that they love doing, that serves individuals, and it's universal in its service, there may be slight variations, but they mitigate those variations by being resilient enough to tweak what they're doing to meet the needs and just keep flourishing.
Sure, and we see that time and time again with technology, for example. Those who keep up with technology flourish, and those who miss technology. For example, I think it was Kodak with the film. They basically lost the boat and missed the digital camera age.
Yes, they missed the digital camera. I think they're out of business today. But it's about caring, because caring means you're constantly caring enough to find out what the needs of the person is today. Just like a parent caring for the children's value systems and needs are going to be changing as they go and mature. So meeting those needs each time is we're being trained as a parent to meet those needs as a child. But if that spills over into business, the changing environment, the changing needs of the people in society, if we care enough like we do our children about humanity, we will meet those needs and have foresight to anticipate what they are. The people who can see in advance where it's going are the ones taking advantage of it. I was in South Africa meeting with a gentleman named Vivian who owns a company called Neo Africa. And he has many subsidiaries inside that company. And about 8 years ago, he was telling me about the iPhone and the phone business and where it's headed, and that someday we'll do everything by the phone. And a decade ago, that wasn't really quite foreseen yet. And so he was already planning with the IT companies and doing what he was doing and involved in electronic energy systems and minerals and mining, and he was already developing what was going to be needed for that. And he's flourished because he had foresight to think of what the needs were, and he was able to create the industries to do it and participate in the industries that were doing it. So there's never a lack of opportunity to a person who cares about humanity and has foresight and adaptability to go and meet the needs.
Sure, and how do people, especially business owners in small businesses, develop that foresight in your view?
Well, every individual has a set of priorities and set of values that they live their life by. And whenever they're living congruently and in alignment authentically with their highest value, they have the greatest resilience factor. They have the greatest foresight, greatest vision, the greatest adaptability, the greatest innovation capacities. So living congruently with what's highest on your value is one of the keys of adapting to a changing environment. Stress is the inability to adapt to a changing environment. And the second you actually are living by the highest values, you have the greatest resilience, and you mitigate the volatilities that are occurring by having foresight and coming up with solutions. And if you see things, no matter what happens, as how it's helping you get closer to what you really want, you're adaptable. One of the greatest questions I've learned is, how is whatever I'm experiencing today helping me fulfill my mission? No matter what it is, supportive or challenging, no matter, how does it help me fulfill my mission? And when you see things on the way, not in the way, you're extremely adaptable. And then you turn these challenges into opportunities.
Sure. What about people that don't have humanity's best interest at heart, or people that don't have the integrity part in their business, or seemingly don't have the integrity?
Well, anybody that there's an equity theory, and equity theory says that built inside every human being is a thermostat for fair exchange. And so anytime you try to get something for nothing or try to give something for nothing, eventually backfires. I've worked on the charity side where they try to give something for nothing that's backfired. I've worked on the other side where corporations are narcissistically trying to get something for nothing. None of those are sustainable long term because people are not dumb and they figure things out, and then you eventually have to go back and humble yourself. If you get cocky or value yourself if you're trying to be altruistic. Nature is trying to bring a balance of altruism and narcissism, trying to balance of fair exchange to make sustainability. And so anytime you try to waver to one side or the other, you get smacked back into the center.
Sure. How can people value themselves more and value their self-worth more so that they can charge what they're worth?
Well, their self-worth is automatically a reflection of the congruency they have between their intentions and daily actions and their highest values. Whenever they're doing something that's truly valuable, that they value in their life, their self-worth goes up. Anytime they're trying to subordinate to everybody else and try to infiltrate themselves with everybody's expectations and do things that aren't really meaningful to them, they devalue themselves. And then they try to look for immediate gratification to compensate by buying other brands to make them feel important, etc., which are transient effects at best. Doing something that's meaningful, that serves people, that's high in your values is the key to growing self-worth. When you do, you have a tendency to want to serve humanity. You love solving problems. And so you tend to mitigate these volatilities of narcissism and altruism, and you try to find fair exchange. It's the only thing that's sustainable. I was asked by a gentleman named Winston in South Africa recently, who works with governments and the presidents of governments, and he is involved with getting $4 and $5 billion tranches of money coming into the country to build infrastructure. And he was talking about how some of the presidents are thinking immediate gratification and thinking of filling their pockets and have some degrees of corruption, and they're not basically thinking long term, which actually makes them more prosperous. In the long run, they'll come out with more if they do something for the society, because when they stop being president, they'll reap the rewards of the service that they provided and the name and the brand and legacy that they create. And so shifting that. But what happens is when people are not understanding that and they're not knowing how to live in the executive center of their brain, they just want immediate gratification. That's a sign of living by low values, and it eventually bites you. You eventually have corruption, you eventually get the world against you, and you, instead of leaving a legacy and actually building wealth, you end up destroying the very wealth you thought you were going to get from immediate gratification.
We've seen many examples of that, and we haven't seen enough examples.
Yeah, well, we're seeing that. I see that in almost every country. It's a development stage of a country. As Plato talked about in the Republic, there's stages of moral and social development in socioeconomics, and it's a stage. And whenever you have disempowered people, you tend to have these autocrats and these monarchs or these oligarchs or whatever that try to do that. But eventually, and they try to suppress the education of the people and keep it going. But eventually that humbles because revolutions occur. And other countries come in today, because we're living in a global society, and they come in here and knock it down. So nature is forcing us, and wisdom is knowing how to keep those in equanimity right from the beginning. Much wiser.
Yeah. And the opposite of that, exactly as you pointed out, is the legacy like Nelson Mandela's legacy and so on.
Well, even Nelson Mandela had a few sides. Winnie, I've chatted with Winnie, his former wife. He has some other sides of the coin too. Almost everybody has two sides, and you want to make sure you know both sides, otherwise you fantasize about people or live in fantasies of putting them up on pedestals. I would say nobody's worth putting on pedestals or pits, but everybody's worth putting in hearts. And we all have two sides, and it's wise to have those and honor those two sides and not live in fantasies about it. But Nelson Mandela at least stood for a cause that is left an ideal in society. Now the ANC, who's in South Africa, was supposedly leveraging off that, but they're not living by it, and they're being humbled by a new DA that's coming up and empowering, overriding them, because nature's doing its job. Nature, there's laws of humans, and then there's laws of nature and laws of the universe. And you can't break the laws of the universe, but you can certainly try to override human laws. But eventually the laws of nature will get you, bring you back into balance.
And that comes back to the fair exchange and understanding both sides of the coin.
Yes, I think Emerson said it in his essays on compensation, a good read for anybody about the laws of compensation to keep things back into equilibrium.
In today's economy, and especially in Perth, Perth's hurting because one of its prime sectors, which is mining, is quite down. What would be some of the things that Perth businesses could be doing or focusing on to grow, regardless of what's happening in the economy?
Well, normally, Ricardo's law of economic advantage says that you want to find in a local area the resources that give it competitive advantage. So you still want to have a mining industry, but if you are completely dependent, like putting all your eggs in one basket, you're vulnerable because it's a cyclic market. So it's wise to diversify enough where you don't have such a high percentage of it where everybody in the society is dependent on one thing. You want to diversify it. So it's essential in the leadership of the state to make sure that there's diversity in industry. So you'll bring tourism, you'll bring other industries, IT industries, everything else. There's other industries that can be developed here in Perth, and that's essential. So when there's a downsizing temporarily of the mining, there'll be entrepreneurs that are out there building new entrepreneurial adventures, and that actually helps the overall economy with diversity. So that way it mitigates the volatilities of the next cycle. The cycles will come again. So if you don't learn the lesson the first time, you'll repeat the cycle. That's what lessons are about. So diversity is going to be essential. Globalization is going to be essential. So no matter where the market is, there's always somebody that wants the market. And that's the nature of the beast.
Common sense would say that when things are quiet, it's a good time to develop your people and to be prepared for when the cycle picks up again. But what seems to be happening is this knee-jerk reaction, and companies are slashing the number of employees, sometimes, or in some cases, by half. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it was Paul Allen and Bill Gates that are very cautious. I'm a very cautious person. I don't like to gamble. I like to invest. And they are known for carrying at least a year, if not more, of liquid capital to endure economic challenges. I'm a firm believer of keeping liquidity. Some of the biggest companies in the world have anywhere from 40 up to 100% of an annual income to the company in liquid capital and reserves. So I'm a believer in that, and I think what happens is sometimes people are wanting to use that money for immediate gratification and quick fix instead of having liquidity. And then when all of a sudden the downturn hits, they don't have the liquidity to sustain it, and so they have to downsize, and then they upsize, and they downsize, and they upsize. And they think that's good management, but it's actually a sign that they allowed it to grow too fast and got greedy, and allowed it to grow too small and got narcissistic there. And that's a sign of mismanagement in the long run. Wiser to make sure that, I think Southwest Airlines did a great job in maintaining a stable progression of growth in comparison to a lot of the other airlines, where they'd rise up and they'd just go build these monstrous things, and then they downsize things, and they'd have a new CEO on the rise and another CEO coming down. It's insanity. So what it is it's basically out of governance that leads to those extreme volatilities. And the person that has governance is able to mitigate some of those volatilities and stabilize it. So don't grow too fast, don't grow too small, or don't downsize too quick. Mitigate those by thinking long term and having the liquidity. The greater the liquidity, the less the volatility. And the greater the vision, the less the volatility in companies.
It comes back to balance, the fair exchange.
Yeah, even I think Gina right now in some of her mining interest, she's diversifying it into agriculture. She's buying fertilization plants. She's doing things and diversifying herself, so she's preparing. That's smart. You're diversifying in other industries that are also going to be necessary. Planting, because you're in your country in Australia, you have so much land, and so utilizing that land in more efficient ways is what people who are thinking foresight are going to be doing. They're going to mitigate that. So if this is down, this is up. If this is up, this is down. You're hedging against those volatilities.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Dr. John Demartini. Appreciate your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.